is September the 26th at 1:45 in the afternoon, and we came close to having a frost here the other night. In fact, I think we did have a little bit of frost, but it didn't hurt any of the garden plants. So I thought I'd do a little scoot around the gardens today just to show some of the remaining flowers that are still in pretty good shape, because it won't be long before they're gone. Once we get a couple frosts, they'll be all gone. Here's the new hosta garden that I put in late in the summer. It's just a small area with 4 hostas, and then I've added these other plants for color until the hostas get larger. These are impatiens here, these pink and bright red ones. They're doing great here in the semi-shaded conditions. At the back, I've got these beautiful dragon wing begonias, and they're looking great, really enjoying the same shaded conditions. And here we have some angel face angelonia, just beautiful. I got these on sale midsummer. They were sort of gangly looking and no one had bought them, and I brought them here and they look really good now. They obviously like the conditions. Very pretty white and mauve flowers, similar to snapdragons in their growth habit. An annual that you can get now fairly regularly, different types of angelonia. Here's our large elephant ear section. Got about 3 or 4 of them growing in here with some calla lilies under the shade of the big cottonwood tree. Nice patch of begonias again under the cottonwood. These have done really well here. They've filled in completely this section of the garden, like I was hoping they would. And a lot of our zinnias are still doing well too. These ones here have some nice, bright, cheery looking, healthy looking flowers still at this stage. Some of them have gotten a little older and you can deadhead those, but by and large most of them look good. Our purple comb flowers are looking a little rough for wear though. They've been blooming a long time, put on a really good show, and they're just coming to their end now. And some of them have long passed their end. They've already gone to seed heads here, as you can see. And of course the old standby geraniums are looking pretty. As long as there's been no frost, they tend to look nice. We may bring these in for the winter, let them survive in the pot for the winter, and then bring them out again next year. Our stand of thin-leaved or 3-leaved comb flowers are doing amazingly. And as I mentioned in my previous garden video, I don't even remember planting these. They're a native perennial to the central and eastern United States. They're not really native to Ontario, Canada here, at least not that I know of. And they're thought to be, at this location at least, a short-term perennial. I believe they're seeding themselves here. They've really expanded. They're taking up a good section of this garden now, whereas before they used to be just in this location right here where I'm standing. And you can see now they're going back into the other parts of the garden. Beautiful flowers. They seem to go on and on forever. I think these have been in bloom that looked just like this 2 months ago. So they're a great long-lasting flower for your garden. And these ones here are 4 feet or more, maybe 5 feet high, a lot of these, because they're just a foot lower than me, and I'm 6 feet 1 or so, although I'm probably shrinking with age. But our purple turtle heads are just coming to the end of their bloom cycle. You can see most of the blooms have occurred on the lower section of the stem here, just a few remaining blooms on top. This patch has done well. I planted a single seedling here that I got from an old boss of mine, and they've expanded to this stage over just a matter of probably 6-7 years now. Just a few remaining heads of Oswego tea or bergamot still left blooming. Most of them have finished. You can see here we also have a lot of powdery mildew on the monarda or the bergamot. This is a common occurrence on these plants, unfortunately. Probably more so where they're semi-shaded and may not get enough airflow. These red and purple salvias have put on a great show for the last couple months. here at the edge of this little garden, and they're still looking good. Need a little bit of weeding here and there, but by and large they look great still. Our mauve phlox here is doing very well still, hanging on. They are degenerating a bit, but looking pretty good overall for the time. The hummingbirds and the bees were really enjoying these. Here's my big hosta garden where I added the new mulch this summer. It's looking well. Some of the smaller hostas that for whatever reason didn't grow very big this year, some have recovered and some haven't, but we'll see how they do next year. You can see they're getting a little yellowish looking now, but by and large they're growing quite nicely. And these little begonias always add a nice splash of orange or red color to the hosta garden that I really like. I think it just helps set off the predominantly green color of the hostas. And if you can get a good number of them, like these angel wing or dragon wing types, they look really pretty out here with the hostas. Here's my Coreopsis tinctoria. I believe they called it dwarf Coreopsis in the package of seed that I put here. They're not really that dwarf though, they look pretty good. They're about 3 feet tall. I just love the colors clashing, the bright yellow with the red centers. Very pretty. Some annual poppies I planted here as seeds, and they've been blooming the whole summer. Once they started a couple months ago, they've been just steadily blooming. Unfortunately, I haven't kept them as weeded as I should have, but hard to keep on top of everything. Here's another nice pink phlox, which looks pretty set against the rail fence here. And these perennials have just seeded themselves around the property immediate to the gardens here. But they really are well liked by a lot of insects and hummingbirds. Our dahlias have been putting on quite a show this summer. This is a beautiful salmon pink colored one, a good 7 or 8 inches in diameter, huge flower. We've had a number of these on this plant and one other plant, I guess, this summer. Here's some more up here. Beautiful. It's been the best year we've had for our dahlias. The biggest problem we have is they're very slow to mature, it seems. We even start them indoors. And as you can see, this one even has some new flower heads still coming, but they're probably not going to make it. Once a frost hits, these plants die back very quickly. And these are plants you also have to bring the tuber of in the house in the winter. They can't be left outside or they'll just die. Another massive dahlia head just laying on the ground here. Here's a very pretty one. We have a few specimens of this type. I don't know the exact name anymore, but just beautiful with the red petals tinged with white on the tips. The hydrangeas are at their peak, I would say, as far as flowering. Looking very nice. My only regret is I probably shouldn't have put them in the garden here because they're taking up a little too much space and shading out some of the other plants that I like to have in this area. Another collection of zinnias, still in beautiful shape. Nice, shockingly pink color. Beautiful. For some strange reason, my cosmos have grown to 6 and 7 feet tall, but I've had very few blooms. Now they are just starting to put on buds here now at the top. I think what it is I had them out here for quite a while before I mulched the garden, and I think they were probably suffering from some drought shock. And once I put the mulch on, they did start to grow better, much better. I think it may have delayed them in setting blooms. So they're just starting to get buds now, some of them, and some still don't have any buds. And they're like 6 feet tall, so I've only seen a few blooms this year from them. There's one there now, over here, as you can see here, but not many. And I think that's the reason, but I'm not sure. Right beside there I have our only Tithonia torch, Mexican sunflower, that's come into bloom this year. Again, I think it's a similar thing. I didn't mulch them early enough, and so they were slower growing and just trying to survive through some of the early summer droughts. This one did better and managed to come into bloom fairly well over the last couple months. So I got to remember next year when I plant these things to really mulch them well and maybe add more organic matter to the soil. They really like to have moist roots. Our potted lantanas are still looking really nice. I did cover these one night when there was supposed to be frost, and we didn't get a frost, luckily, at least not one that was damaging to plants. So they're still looking good, but I'll probably be bringing these in before long, trimming them back quite a bit by a third or more, maybe half, and then bring them in pots, smaller pots, and then overwintering them in the house. Our canna plants are still putting on some blooms. Some have gone to seed here, as you can see. The plants themselves look good, and this was not the ideal location for them in some ways. The soil is very crappy, sandy here. Even though I try to amend it every so often, it eventually goes away. You have to keep amending it constantly in sandy soil. Again, another plant you have to bring in. You have to bring the tubers in and overwinter those, which becomes quite a chore when you have quite a few of them to bring in. Here's our rose of Sharon bush. It took forever to come into bloom this year. I was thinking it wasn't even going to do it. But then all of a sudden, all the blooms came out. They're starting to finish up a bit now, but they're still looking pretty good. Pretty shrubs, but just take a long time to not only bloom, but even just to send leaves out in the summer. Sometimes you think the shrub is dead, and then it starts sending leaves out in June. And this is a common trait with the flowering hibiscus as well, the perennial flowering hibiscus that many people have in their gardens that produces the huge flower heads. Here's another example of that red and white dahlia, still sending out some nice blooms here in a different garden, set against my little ornamental lion here. I believe this is autumn joy sedum. It just gets bigger every year, requires very little work, doesn't mind dry, droughty soils. Eventually the greenish heads become mauve or purple colored. And again, the bees really like these. Bees and flies of all types really like to feed on there. The nasturtiums are pretty, but I find they're too spreading actually, because I'll put them in. You know, I think I'm giving other plants enough space, and then inevitably these things crawl all over and just cover them up. For example, I've got another little lantana down in here, and I keep taking the leaves off these nasturtiums here, but I'll come back a few days later and this will be covered right up again. This is another Rudbeckia triloba, like the ones I showed earlier that were bright yellow and doing so well in our other garden. These two I actually did buy. I've got another one elsewhere here, but this is one called Prairie Glow. And again, it was getting covered over by these nasturtiums, so it's had a bit of a battle. Plus, something was eating them at the start of the summer, so I had to put these wire cages around. I don't know if it was deer or a groundhog or something, but something kept chewing them off. But eventually they did survive and managed to bloom, which is good, but I really wanted to see what they look like. And they're very pretty. And I don't know if they're going to seed like the other ones have, but we'll see if they come up again. Hopefully they'll come up for a few years. This chrysanthemum has done amazingly well. We planted it a couple years ago, and usually when we do that and we leave them in the ground, they don't survive here. They don't show up the following spring. This one though did come up this spring, and it was very feeble looking. It just had a few leaves and took a while to get started, but it kept going and going, and now it turned into a full-fledged, beautifully flowering. I love these nice long petals that it has, long narrow petals. Nice big heads, 2 to 3 inches wide. Here are a few remaining flowers of our white swan coneflower. You can see it's pretty well done too, just like the purple coneflowers. But this is my side oats grama grass here, Bouteloua curtipendula, one of the native grasses that grow not too far from here in Ontario and down through the United States. It's a prairie grass, and it has these strange looking seed heads that grow along one side of the stem predominantly, hence the name side oats grama. And it's quite rare in Ontario and probably throughout parts of the United States as well. Here's more nasturtiums in bloom. I thought all of the ones I was planting here were these pale yellow ones, but for some reason most of the nasturtiums that came up were orange, the typical orange.